Welcome back to the deep dive. You know that feeling when you reread a beloved book and suddenly realize just how much context you missed the first time?
Oh, absolutely.
That's exactly what we're doing today. We are opening the pages of the Fellowship of the Ring,
hmm
and our mission is not just to trace Frodo's journey, but to really excavate the unbelievable amount of hidden history, linguistic rigor, and even the ongoing editorial work that makes Middle-earth what it is.
The most detailed fictional world ever conceived. It really is.
It has to be.
And that contrast you mentioned is so key, isn't it? I mean, we start the story in the coziest, most settled corner of the world, the Shire,
Right.
but we quickly find ourselves confronted with these monumental challenges. So our deep dive today is really structured to show you the layers of context.
Okay.
Why is the text you hold in your hands so precise? How do these simple hobbits fit into this vast ancient history? And what are the shocking true stakes of Frodo's simple flight from home?
We're exploring where academic obsession meets epic adventure. And I think we have to start in a place that might seem a little counterintuitive for a fantasy epic,
And where's that?
the editorial suite. So let's unpack this. When we pick up a major published novel, especially a classic, we assume the words on the page are fixed, set in stone.
Right, it's the final version.
Exactly. But the source material for Tolkien's work reveals something astounding. He had an almost unique and nearly lifelong concern for textual accuracy that led to constant revision, even after publication.
It's so true. The sources really highlight J.R.R. Tolkien's extraordinary, quote, concern for the textual accuracy and coherence of his massive work.
And this wasn't just tweaking plot points.
Not at all. He made many emendations, even in later printings or during his own lifetime. This gave him a privilege that, I mean, most authors only dream of.
Hi, Chef.
Multiple chances to polish, to correct, and to further develop the deep lore, the languages, the geography, the peoples of Middle-earth, all of that stuff that makes it feel so organically real.
I find his distinction between the different types of corrections absolutely fascinating. It really shows his internal hierarchy of what was important. He didn't sweat the small stuff, relatively speaking.
Exactly. He viewed minor discrepancies in things like the genealogies and calendars, etc., as simply an amusing pastime.
An amusing pastime.
Yeah, he compared it to the complex, often inconsistent records you'd find in real-world historical annals. But he drew a very sharp, clear line. He said, errors in the text are another matter. He cared so immensely about the reader's textual experience being clean, precise, and totally consistent with the established reality of the world he had created.
That level of authorial dedication is amazing, but it also sounds like it created a kind of perpetual motion machine of revision.
It did.
It certainly must have set up an incredible challenge for those who came after him, didn't it?
It absolutely did. His passing in 1973 didn't finalize the text at all. If anything, it initiated what the sources refer to as a post-mortem editorial challenge that just ballooned into a vast and complex web.
A vast and complex web. That sounds
Yeah,
less like literary management and more like trying to wrangle a kraken.
that's a good way to put it. Publishers struggled for decades, literally, to maintain what they called textual integrity.
So what made that process so difficult, especially, say, in the 70s and 80s?
The difficulty really stemmed from the fundamental process of book production at the time. I mean, every single time the text had to be reset for publication in a new format. And just think about the flood of popular paperbacks that came out in those decades.
I remember those.
Well, every time they did that, huge numbers of new misprints have crept in. It's an editorial nightmare. You fix one typographical error, and you often introduce 2 or 3 new ones, especially in those notoriously dense appendices in the index.
So Tolkien's perfectionism, in a strange way, paradoxically led to chaos after his death. The sheer scale of the text made it fragile against these industrial typesetting errors.
That's it, exactly.
Was there any edition that managed to resist this decay?
Yes, thankfully. Our sources specifically point to the original 3-volume British hardcover edition. That one maintained the highest level of textual integrity throughout that whole chaotic period. It was like the stable anchor amidst this shifting sea of paperbacks.
Now, speaking of shifting seas, the critique we're looking at points out that the publishing timeline itself confused even expert researchers and librarians. What was the specific headache with the copyright dates in the U.S.?
Oh, this is a classic archival headache. So the thoroughly revised text, it made its American debut in the 1967 Houghton Mifflin hardcover.
Right.
That edition was photo offset, which means it was physically copied from the 1966 British Allen and Unwin edition, so the dates were initially consistent.
Makes sense.
But here's the confusing part. After those initial printings, the copyright notice was bafflingly changed back to 1965 to match the concurrent Ballantine paperback statement.
Wait, hold on. The text was revised in 66, published in 67, but the cover often said 65.
Precisely. This shifting of the copyright date, as you can imagine, has caused a great deal of confusion for librarians and other researchers who are just trying to track the true lineage and the content revisions between all these different editions.
It sounds like tracking the ancestry of a specific manuscript leaf required the dedication of a ranger.
You're not wrong.
Fortunately, the advent of modern technology finally gave editors the upper hand. How did the 50th anniversary edition leverage these new tools?
It was revolutionary for them. They were finally able to use an electronic copy searchable by keyword or phrase.
A game changer.
Absolutely. It allowed them to develop lists of words that varied between editions and investigate these minute inconsistencies with a speed and accuracy that was just impossible before.
Can you give us a concrete example, like a really fine-line distinction that these electronic tools finally allowed them to nail down, a detail a casual reader might overlook, but that defines Tolkien's world-building precision?
The best example is probably capitalization consistency. Tolkien was meticulous, absolutely meticulous, in distinguishing, say, the common noun, house, like a simple dwelling.
Right, a building.
From the noble noun house, meaning a noble family or a dynasty, like the House of Finwë.
I see.
Using these electronic copies allowed researchers to identify two specific instances where the lowercase house was used when the context clearly demanded the capital house.
And that's critical because
the choice, that tiny error, sometimes obscured the proper status of the entity being discussed. The technology allowed them to conservatively and very carefully correct these subtle, long-standing inconsistencies, finally aligning the text perfectly with the author's known intent for consistency in his world's nomenclature.
it just shows that the pursuit of perfection didn't stop with the author. It continues right through to the editor.
An invisible story, but one that underpins the believability of everything that follows.
It really is. Okay, shifting gears now from the text to the people who inhabit it. The hobbits. This is where we need to synthesize a bit.
Yeah.
The source material establishes them not as just another fantasy race, but as relatives of ours. What does that fundamental kinship imply?
That statement is foundational. It really is. They are described as far nearer to us than elves or even than dwarves. Culturally, they're recognizable.
How so?
We learn that they adopted the languages of men, though after their own fashion, and they shared very similar likes and dislikes with us. The sources are tantalizingly vague about the specific nature of that kinship, though. They note that the precise relationship can no longer be discovered.
Which adds to their mystique, I suppose, a sort of lost folk memory.
Exactly.
So if there are relatives, where did these people begin, geographically speaking, before they settled the comfortable Shire?
Their story begins way back in the forgotten Elder Days, far to the east of where we find them. Their earliest home was in the upper vales of Anduin, which is situated roughly between the Misty Mountains and that vast forest known as Greenwood the Great.
And what pressures spurred their great migration westward? Why would they leave a seemingly comfortable valley?
They cited two main drivers for the move, and both were related to this growing shadow over the world. First, the increasing multiplying of men in the land started to put pressure on their territory.
A population boom.
Right. And second, and much more ominously, a shadow that fell on the forest, which saw Greenwood the Great slowly darken into the dreaded Mirkwood.
A combination of population pressure and creeping evil.
That's what drove them across the Misty Mountains and into the relative safety of Eriador.
And they weren't one monolithic group before the Shire, were they? They came in distinct flavors. I see the Harfoots and the stores mentioned here, and the sources make it clear that these different types reflected their eventual societal roles.
Absolutely. The Harfoots were far the most numerous, and they were considered the most normal and representative variety of hobbit. Exactly. And their close association with dwarves is important here. They lived the longest in burrows and tunnels in the foothills of mountains. They were also the most inclined to settle down, and they moved west earliest, eventually ranging as far as the area around Weathertop.
Okay, so if the Harfoots were the archetype, what about the stores? What made them different?
The stores were the river folk, They lingered long by the banks of the great river Anduin, and crucially, they were less shy of men than their cousins were.
Ah, more outgoing.
In a way, they came west much later, initially settling between Tharbad and Dunland before eventually moving north toward the Shire. And this explains some of the regional differences we see later on. The Brandy Bucks, for instance.
Right.
They retain some of that store's less fearful, more adventurous spirit. They're often associated with water and boats, which makes perfect sense.
Now let's talk architecture, because that's a perfect reflection of their culture. The default Hobbit home is the hole, the smile. How did that ancestral habit translate into the look of the Shire?
It speaks to their deep-seated desire for security and, well, comfort. Living in holes was the ancestral habit, but by the time of Frodo, it was really reserved for the extremes of their society.
The very rich and the very poor.
Exactly. The richest hobbits built these magnificent, luxurious versions of the old diggings. These were the large, complex, and ramifying tunnels they called smiles.
Like Bag End.
Bag End is the perfect example, a sprawling, subterranean mansion.
And the other end of the spectrum.
The poorest hobbits maintained the tradition, but out of necessity. They lived in burrows of the most primitive kind, sometimes with only one window, or even no windows at all. Everyone else, in the middle, had started building above ground.
So if they're building above ground, where did they learn that craft? I mean, that seems like a far cry from just digging burrows.
Well, their building craft, along with a lot of other specialized skills, was probably derived from the Dúnedain.
The ancient kings of men who came out of the West.
That's them. It's also possible they learned some techniques directly from the elves. But the hobbits filtered all this knowledge through their comfort-first mentality.
They certainly didn't go in for grand elvish towers.
No. They preferred long, low, comfortable houses. But one distinctive architectural quirk always remained: their enduring preference for round windows and even round doors.
That's the true signature of the Shire, isn't it? A culture that synthesizes ancient knowledge with an extreme, almost hilarious focus on personal coziness.
Indeed. And this comfort-first mentality, it extends directly to their political structure, or I should say their lack of one.
Given how much effort they put into their comfortable homes and their food, did the hobbits spend any time at all worrying about governance?
Very, very little, which is kind of the genius of the Shire. They had a nominal dignity of governance that belonged to the Thane.
The head of the Took family.
That's right. He was technically the master of the Shire Moot and the captain of the Hobbitry in arms. But here's the synthesis. Because the muster and the moot were only held in times of emergency, and there hadn't been an emergency in centuries.
The office was essentially titular.
Exactly. It's a testament to the Shire's enduring, almost boring peace that their highest hereditary office basically became synonymous with just throwing a great party.
So who's the poor soul who actually had to work? Who kept the lights on, so to speak?
That would be the mayor of Michel Delving. He was the only real official at that date, and his primary and most important duty was presiding at banquets given on the frequent Shire holidays.
Of course it was.
But he did also manage the offices of postmaster and first sheriff.
Ah, the postmaster. Now, given how much hobbits love a good gossip and an even better walk, I bet the messenger service was constantly busy.
It was much the busier of the two. The sources note that those hobbits who were lettered wrote constantly to friends and relations who lived further away than a comfortable afternoon's walk. It's a society driven by correspondence and celebration, not command.
And the sheriffs, the famous hobbit police. They sound less like law enforcement and more like extremely lazy civil servants.
They were minimalist to the extreme, only 12 total for the entire Shire.
Cool.
3 per farthing, designated for inside work. They had no uniforms, just a feather in their caps. Functionally, they were rather Haywards than policemen, primarily concerned with managing stray beasts and keeping the fences mended.
Imagine being the designated police force whose primary job is managing stray cows. That's the absolute pinnacle of peaceful isolation right there.
It really is.
Before we move on, we have to talk about that one peculiar habit that makes hobbits truly unique: their love of pipeweed.
The sources describe this as an astonishing habit of inhaling the smoke of burning leaves from a herb, a variety probably of Nicotiana.
So tobacco.
Basically, it's so central to their identity that all the knowledge discovered about this custom in antiquity was compiled by Meriadoc Brandybuck Merry in his thorough work Herb Lore of the Shire.
So Merry wasn't just a prankster. He was a serious social historian and botanist on the side.
He was.
This just underscores that these small folk have a deep, documented history, even for their most domestic traditions.
And that domesticity was coupled with a severe isolation, which is critical to the story's beginning. Over the long peace, they spoke less and less with the elves and grew afraid of them. They started to regard those who dealt with them with distrust.
And their view of the wider world shrank, didn't it?
It did. Critically, the sea became a word of fear among them and a token of death, causing them to turn their faces resolutely away from the west, away from the elven haven of Valinor.
And this isolation is perfectly symbolized by those ancient, silent elf towers.
The ones on the Tower Hills, visible in the West Farthing, they're a vanishing symbol of a mighty past that hobbits simply chose to forget.
That era of perfect isolation and historical amnesia ends dramatically with one spectacular birthday. Let's trace the shift from comfort to catastrophe, starting with the long-expected party on September 22nd.
The party was legendary. It was celebrating Bilbo's 111th birthday and Frodo's 33rd, his coming of age simultaneously.
The doubleheader.
And the guest list was staggering. The text says practically everybody living near was invited, plus a whole host of relations from across the Shire.
And the centerpiece, of course, Gandalf's fireworks. A brief, joyous moment of magic before the doom settles in.
They were truly magical. The fireworks included rockets shaped like scintillating birds singing with sweet voices, glittering butterflies, and pillars of colored fire that transformed into swans and eagles.
But the grand finale, in Bilbo's honor.
The red golden dragon. Not life-size, but terribly lifelike. It breathed actual fire from its jaws, leaving the crowd astonished and, frankly, a little bit terrified.
The moment Bilbo vanishes is the inciting incident, and the source material makes it so clear that the ring's influence is immediate and physical.
It is intensely visceral. Even as he gives his infamous speech, Bilbo is fingering the golden ring. When he confronts Gandalf afterward, the ring slips out of his hand when he tries to put it on the mantelpiece, almost as if it had a will of its own.
He only manages to leave it because Gandalf demands it.
Right. Gandalf forces him to make a choice. A profound spasm of anger passed swiftly over the hobbit's face before that rage gives way to this sense of blessed relief when he finally relinquishes his obsession.
And we often forget that Bilbo doesn't just wander off alone. He has company when he leaves Bag End.
That's right. He changes out of his party clothes, grabs his favorite stick, and goes off on the road, accompanied by 3 dwarves who had been busy packing his things.
So he was already following the same westward track that Frodo would eventually take.
Mm-hmm.
The shadow of the past quickly becomes the present pursuit. Gandalf confirms the ring's true nature when Frodo sees that fiery elvish script, confirming it's Sauron's master tool. And the urgency is then magnified by the horrible backstory of Gollum.
Yeah, Gandalf's interrogation of Gollum confirmed the whole dark history. We learn Gollum had concocted this pathetic defense for murdering Déagol.
His birthday present.
Exactly. He claimed the ring was his birthday present because it obviously turned up just for him. This was his way of justifying the first murder committed over the ring in the entire Third Age.
And Gollum's escape from Mirkwood is chilling because it shows his focus. He's not just running, he's hunting.
He is hunting revenge. His longing for the ring, fueled by the knowledge that Baggins had it, proved stronger than his fear of light or of orcs.
He escaped and was now seeking Frodo.
Convinced he had good friends now, good friends and very strong who would help him. And of course, Bilbo had foolishly told Gollum his name when they met under the mountain, which gave Gollum the key to finding the Shire.
Frodo believes he must sneak out of the Shire alone, but he's quickly proven wrong. Here's where we reveal the brilliant synthesis of the source material. The Hobbit conspiracy.
This is one of the best little reveals in the whole book, I think. Merry and Pippin were far from clueless. They were conspirators. They had known Frodo was planning to leave for months since the spring.
So they were planning his logistics.
The entire logistics of his departure, all to prevent him from going off suddenly, all on your own like he did. They took proactive steps to make sure he was supported.
And Sam's involvement. We know he was the gardener, but what was his specialized role in this conspiracy?
Sam Gamgee, nominally Frodo's servant and companion, was the group's collector of information. He had been listening outside the windows and doors, gathering intelligence on Frodo's plans and Gandalf's warnings.
Eavesdropping.
Basically, yeah. But Gandalf, far from being annoyed by the spying, unexpectedly supported Sam's inclusion. He told the conspirators that Sam had some sense, and that Frodo absolutely needed someone he could trust, regardless of his rank.
The urgency ramps up immediately. The Rak Riders are already close.
They are moving so much faster than Gandalf ever anticipated. Frodo's first encounter is near the road, and it forces him to feel that immediate primal need to hide.
But the Shire, despite its political apathy, provided a moment of unexpected defense.
It did. The gaffer, Sam's dad, had a conversation with a tall and black-like stranger, a rider who was asking for Baggins, and he successfully sent him away to Bucklebury, a small act of misdirection that bought them precious time.
The second major hurdle is the Old Forest, which is not just an obstacle, but an active enemy.
The Old Forest was profoundly hostile. The trees near Woody End were taller, darker, and thicker, and they radiated an ill will and a palpable feeling of enmity.
The trees themselves were malicious.
Yes, the hostile sentient trees, particularly Old Man Willow, worked deliberately to divert and entrap them. Our sources specify that whenever the hobbits tried to climb upwards and to the left to find a clear path, they were actively forced to the right and downwards.
Pushed toward the river.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the willow then closed around Merry and Pippin, gripping them like a pair of pincers.
They are saved by Tom Bombadil, the master of the forest. His character is so unique because he seems completely unaffected by the rules that govern the rest of Middle-earth. What is his specific relationship with the land?
Tom Bombadil is the master of wood, water, and hill, which is a designation of control, but not ownership. When Frodo asks Goldberry if the land belongs to him, she gives a solemn and profound, "No, indeed."
She says, that would indeed be a burden.
Right. The trees, the grasses, and all things belong each to themselves. Tom simply has no fear, and he operates completely outside the normal systems of power, ownership, and dread, which is also why the ring has no effect on him.
And he rescues them again from the Barrow-dens.
Yes, where the hobbits wake to find an ancient, menacing sword laid across their necks.
And Tom rearms them, which is a critical moment for the hobbits' survival later on.
It is. Before setting them on the road, he chooses a dagger for each hobbit. They're described as long, keen, and of marvelous workmanship, damasked with serpent forms in red and gold.
Ancient blades of the lost kingdom of Arnor.
Untouched by time. And they instantly replaced the small kitchen knives they had been carrying. He then rides with them on Fatty Lumpkin, his pony, until they reach the very borders of his domain.
The respite ends in Bree, and Frodo commits the ultimate blunder, exposing their presence to the world.
At the sign of the prancing pony, he slips on the ring while standing on a table. He instantly disappears and just as instantly reveals his presence and his true name to the entire common room.
A total catastrophe.
Which immediately brings the attention of that shadowy figure in the corner. Strider.
Strider is initially viewed with deep suspicion. How does he, Aragorn's son of Arathorn, convince the skeptical hobbits of his true identity?
He proved his identity by proving his knowledge. He revealed that he had been behind the hedge west of Bree, eavesdropping on their conversation with Tom Bombadil.
So he was already watching them.
Already guarding them. He'd heard Frodo specifically instruct his friends not to mention the name Baggins. He then declared himself the last remnant in the north of the great people, the Men of the West, who has been ceaselessly guarding the quiet lands against the shadow.
This clarifies the often overlooked role of the Rangers, a critical point in understanding why the Shire remained untouched for so long.
The Rangers are the invisible shield. Strider explains that they are lonely men, hunters ever of the servants of the enemy. While Gondor is the stalwart tower in the south, the Rangers accept scornful names like Strider because they have to operate in secret to keep simple folk free from care and fear.
Without them,
dark things from the houseless hills or sunless woods would have destroyed the quiet lands long, long ago.
Despite Strider's guardianship, the Black Riders strike at Bree, though not openly the inn itself. They choose a different kind of warfare.
Economic warfare. They steal every horse and beast in the place, including all of Merry's ponies, just to delay the company. The hobbits are then forced to buy a replacement from Bill Ferny, a known spy.
Bill the Poe.
Purchasing his poor old half-starved creature of a pony for thrice its worth.
They escape and make for Weathertop, where the riders finally catch up and inflict the true danger.
5 riders attack that night. The sources note they didn't seem to expect resistance, and Frodo is wounded with a deadly knife. The wound is unique. It manifests only as a cold white mark on his shoulder, inflicted with the Black Breath.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The Black Breath isn't just a physical wound, it's a spiritual poison. What was the goal of the attack, given they didn't kill him outright?
The Nazgul weren't aiming for death. They were aiming for eternal servitude. The Black Breath is a spiritual poison designed to subdue Frodo's will and turn him slowly into an eternal thrall. a passive servant of the Witch King and thus of Sauron himself, a wraith.
A wraith.
Strider knew immediately that the writers believed this creeping transformation would subdue Frodo to their will, which meant they didn't need to chase him, they just needed to wait for him to turn.
The final, desperate stage of the flight is the race to Rivendell, culminating in the appearance of a truly mighty ally.
Glorfindel, an elf lord, and one of the mighty of the Firstborn. He met them, knowing the wound was beyond any wilderness healing. To Frodo, who was now fading under the influence of the wound, Glorfindel appeared as a shining white figure, a being of light and immense power.
And he places Frodo on his horse.
His white elf horse, to carry him to the ford of Brunnen, where the riders, who had previously gone north, were now lying in wait for their prey.
Frodo finally wakes up in the sanctuary of Rivendell, recovering from a trauma that went way beyond the physical. He wakes on October 24th, and though the immediate peril is gone, Strider notes that all that remains is a cold white mark on his shoulder. That wound is a permanent, silent reminder of what nearly claimed his soul.
It's the ultimate scar mark of the spiritual battle he survived. And who is the first familiar face he sees? Bilbo, of course, who is frightfully glad to see him safe.
But the ring's influence is still a subtle shadow, even in the sanctuary.
It is. Bilbo, even in the safety of Rivendell, reveals a momentary, really troubling relapse.
What happens?
In a quiet moment, Bilbo leans over and whispers, asking Frodo to let him just to peep at it again. The sources note that the beautiful music and singing in the Hall of Fire seem to falter at his question.
Wow.
He recovers quickly, perhaps shamed by his own lapse, and dedicates himself to writing the next chapter of his book, though he complains with a sigh, "Don't adventures ever have an end, I suppose not?"
That transition from personal relief to geopolitical seriousness is the Council of Elrond, the pivotal moment where the quest shifts from flight to mission. Gloin, the dwarf, brings grave news from the north concerning the Lonely Mountain.
Gloin reveals that the dwarves are deeply, deeply troubled. Messengers from Sauron had come to King Brand in Dale and to Dane at the mountain, openly seeking the ring. The enemy was testing the loyalty of the dwarves.
And he also brings bad news about Balin.
More tragically, yes. Gloin relates the story of Balin's foolish but valiant attempt to reclaim the ancestral home of Moria Khazad-dûm.
And the threat was not just internal, it was external as well.
Precisely. The dwarves feared that if they failed to submit to Sauron's demand to locate the ring, the enemy would simply move men, likely the Easterlings, under his rule to assail King Brand and Dane, crushing the mountain and dale once and for all.
The second urgent messenger is Boromir, the man of Gondor, who arrives seeking the meaning of a prophetic dream. What was his specific quest?
Boromir's arrival was provoked by a sudden war that erupted out of Mordor in June. He described the terror spread by the Black Horsemen, a shadow under the moon, which instilled fear in even the boldest men.
He had come to Rivendell to seek the meaning of the riddle.
The riddle. Seek for the sword that was broken and to find the place of Isildur's bane, the ring itself. Gondor was suddenly besieged and desperately needed hope.
To put these immediate problems into perspective, Elrond gives this necessary, humbling history lesson on the kingdoms of men, explaining the decay of Númenórean power.
Elrond chronicles the gradual shrinking and fading of that ancient, powerful bloodline. In the north, the great city of Annúminas fell into ruin, and the heirs of Elendil moved to Fornost, which is now desolate and feared. It's called Dead Men's Dyke.
The kingdom of Arnor dwindled.
Until their entire lordship passed away. In the south, Gondor endured longer, building strong places like Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Rising Moon, and Minas Anor, the Tower of the Setting Sun.
But even Gondor failed eventually, due to mixing their blood with lesser men.
That's right. The line of Meneldur failed, the White Tree withered, and the high blood of the Númenóreans mingled with that of lesser men. Crucially, their watch upon the walls of Mordor slept.
Evil things returned.
They took Minas Ithil and made it into the dread place called Minas Morgul. Minas Anor was renamed Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, constantly at war and relying on stewards. The message is crystal clear. The great kingdoms of men have failed to protect themselves.
This historical context establishes that the strength of men is failing, and so the ring's fate must be decided. Elrond states the doom. The ring must be destroyed. But Gandalf offers this philosophical defense of the mission, calling the attempt an act of necessary folly.
This is the critical insight. Gandalf argues that this path is not despair, because they cannot know the end beyond all doubt. Instead, it is wisdom to recognize necessity when all other courses have been weighed.
So they have to cloak themselves in folly.
Because Sauron, though wise and a master strategist, weighs all hearts using only one measure: desire, desire for power. The thought will never enter his heart that anyone would seek to destroy the ring, thus putting him out of reckoning.
They're leveraging his hubris against him.
A brilliant strategy born of humility.
Following the council, the Fellowship is formed. The 9 Walkers, countering the 9 Riders. Who makes the final cut?
The Fellowship consists of 9 companions: Frodo and Sam representing the hobbits, Aragorn, whose sword, Andúril, is reforged from the sword that was broken, and Boromir representing men, Gimli and Legolas representing dwarves and elves, and, surprisingly, Merry and Pippin completing the ranks.
I have to come back to Merry and Pippin. Elrond clearly had reservations about bringing such inexperienced youths into mortal danger. Why did Gandalf insist on their inclusion?
Elrond initially stated that the young hobbits did not understand and could not imagine what lay ahead. But Gandalf's defense was beautiful and powerful. He stated that if they did understand the full danger, they would not dare to go, but they would still wish that they dared and be shamed and unhappy to be left behind. Gandalf insisted that in this matter it would be better to trust friendship rather than to great wisdom. Their loyalty and their pure hearts, not their skills, were their greatest assets.
That's a profound statement. On a quest driven by the failure of power and wisdom, friendship becomes the ultimate currency. Let's talk about Frodo's gear, specifically the gift Bilbo gives him.
Bilbo gives Frodo Sting, the elf sword, which is a great gift in itself. But the truly astonishing gift is unwound from beneath Bilbo's clothes. A small shirt of mail, close woven of many rings, as supple almost as linen, cold as ice, and harder than steel. It shone like moonlit silver.
Wait, that's the mithril shirt? The sources give us a jaw-dropping appraisal of its worth.
They do. Gandalf later told Frodo that its worth was greater than the value of the whole Shire and everything in it.
The entire Shire. So Frodo was walking around with the price of every smile, every barrel of ale, and every acre of farmland under a common waistcoat.
Pretty much.
That kind of value, just for one piece of clothing, shows the lost splendor of the dwarves and the forgotten wealth of Middle-earth that Sauron now craves. The Fellowship sets out, but the journey immediately hits a wall when they attempt to cross the Misty Mountains via the Redhorn Gate under Caradhras.
They attempt the pass, but they're blocked by this sudden, heavy, unnatural snowstorm. Gandalf admits he knew there was a risk of snow, but notes that it seldom falls heavily so far south.
Boromir is the one who voices the suspicion that this is not natural weather.
Right. He claims the storm is a contrivance of the enemy, and that Sauron can govern the storms in the Mountains of Shadow.
When the way above is shut, they must take the dark road under the mountain, leading them to the doors of Durin, the west gate of Moria.
And they are confronted by the famous riddle inscribed in the elven tongue of the West. The doors of Durin, speak, friend, and enter.
Gandalf struggles because he's overthinking it.
He is. He's assuming it's a complex password or some secret phrase involving deep lore.
And it was Gandalf himself who finally realized the simple truth.
He did. The password was the instruction itself. The word for friend in Elvish is melon. Once he spoke it, the doors were outlined in silver and silently swung outwards. But the light barely lasted a moment before they were attacked.
The Watcher in the Water. What was the mechanism of their entrapment which simultaneously sealed their doom and forced Sam's greatest loyalty test?
As soon as they were inside, many coiling arms seized the doors on either side and with horrible strength swung them around. The doors slammed shut, plunging them into darkness.
So it trapped the company in
and simultaneously forced Sam to choose between his master and the loyal Bill the pony, who was still outside.
Sam chose Frodo, of course. It's also noted that Bill wouldn't have made it through the mines anyway.
Gandalf confirmed that. He had worried about the pony all along, admitting the road under the mountains was too narrow and steep for him. When Sam was distraught, Gandalf offered him the clear, terrible choice. You will have to choose between Bill and your master.
And Sam's response?
He immediately abandoned the poor pony and leapt onto the steps, realizing his duty was to accompany Frodo, whatever the cost.
Deep within the halls of Khazad-dûm, the tension is ratcheted up by the first of several major errors committed by the hobbits. Pippin's folly.
A moment of childish curiosity that heralds their doom. In the chamber of Mazarbul, Pippin crept to the edge of a great hole, a well, and, moved by a sudden impulse, he dropped a loose stone.
Just to see what would happen.
And after a long, silent wait, a faint plunk echoed up from the depths. Gandalf was furious, calling him a fool of a took and warning him that this was not a hobbit walking party.
And what was the horrifying result of that stone drop?
After a few minutes of silence, faint knocks began echoing from the depths. Tom tap, tap tom, repeated like signals. Gimli was convinced it was the sound of a hammer, of dwarves working.
But Gandalf knew better.
He feared that something has been disturbed that would have been better left quiet. The sound was not of industry, but of pursuit.
The grim purpose of their detour is confirmed when they find the Chamber of Mazarbul, Balin's tomb.
Inside, they find the Book of Mazarbul, a record of Balin's colony since coming to the Dimril Dale nearly 30 years earlier. The final pages confirm the fate of the dwarves.
Valiant but foolish.
Their attempt to retake Moria was exactly that. They were trapped and killed by orcs. This detour just confirms that the path beneath the mountains is already tainted by death and folly.
The Fellowship is soon pursued by orcs and trolls, leading to the narrow stone bridge over the Black Chasm.
The orcs swarmed them, brandishing scimitars and spears that shone red as blood in the firelight. To bridge a great fissure of fire that opened across the floor, they used massive trolls, bearing great slabs of stone.
But the terror didn't truly begin until Legolas cried out.
He cried out in dismay as the orc ranks parted, revealing a dark shape of ancient horror.
The Balrog. Describe its appearance, because this is one of the most iconic images in all of fantasy.
It was like a great shadow, in the middle of which was a dark form, of man shape maybe, yet greater. And a power and terror seemed to be in it and to go before it. It was immense, a horror of the ancient world, dark and oppressive, yet streaming with fire from within.
And Gandalf's reaction.
He leaned heavily on his staff and muttered, "A Balrog. Now I understand. What an evil fortune, and I am already weary."
This leads to Gandalf's incredible sacrifice on the bridge.
Gandalf stood alone on the bridge and confronted the creature, crying out in a voice of thunder. He then broke his staff on the stone, shattering the light and casting the Balrog down.
Buying the Fellowship's escape at the cost of his own life.
A dramatic, selfless act.
Emerging from the shadow of Moria, the remaining Fellowship finds solace in the Golden Wood, Lothlórien. But even in this elven haven, there is initial conflict and distrust, revealing the deep fracture lines of Middle-earth.
Haldir, the elf who met them, was openly distrustful of Gimli. He cited the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. This deep racial division was so strong that Haldir insisted Gimli must go blindfold through Lothlórien.
A condition Gimli only accepted after Aragorn's intervention.
And Legolas's.
Aragorn is worried that even here they are still being tracked by the enemy.
He was right. Haldir confirmed that not only had he seen a large troop of orcs going north toward Moria many days before, but they had also recently had to actively lead a company of orcs away from the Fellowship's position, confirming they were close behind.
And he mentions another creature.
He does. An unsettling incident. A strange, wary creature that fled their tree when he touched the stem, noting it was not an orc, and possessed some skill in trees. This was Gollum, relentlessly pursuing the ring across mountains and forests.
Lórien itself is described as a land of timeless beauty, a place where the normal rules of the world seem suspended.
Haldir leads them to Seren Amroth, the heart of the ancient realm. It's a place of profound, almost heartbreaking beauty where here ever bloom the winter flowers and the unfading grass, the yellow Elenor and the pale Nifredil. Frodo feels he has stepped into a timeless land that did not fade or change or fall into forgetfulness.
The Lady Galadriel then offers Sam Gamgee a disturbing glimpse into her mirror, which she warns is a perilous sight, not a reliable guide.
The mirror immediately shows Sam a terrifying series of fast-shifting visions tied to his greatest fears. He sees Frodo asleep under a great dark cliff. Then, in a horrific flash, he sees himself climbing an endless winding stair, urgently seeking something.
And then the worst vision for a hobbit.
The most devastating one. He sees the trees of his home falling, crashing to the ground. He's terrified and he confesses, "I wish I'd never come here and I don't want to see no more magic."
But the vision solidifies his resolve, proving Gandalf's wisdom and trusting his friendship over their lack of skill.
Sam tells the lady, despite his fear, "No, I'll go home by the long road with Mr. Frodo or not at all." The only bit of Hobbit defiance he manages to add is that he hopes he does get back someday because somebody's going to catch it hot, if what he saw comes true. His resolution is based entirely on personal devotion.
Finally, Galadriel tests Frodo, and more profoundly, she tests herself against the ultimate temptation of power. Frodo offers the ring to her.
He offers the one ring to her, feeling the burden is too great. Galadriel acknowledges that her heart had greatly desired to ask for it for many years, pondering what she might do. She refuses.
Why?
She knows that if she took it, Her noble desire to put things to rights and make some folk pay for their dirty work would inevitably lead her to become a dark queen, terrible and beautiful.
By refusing the ring, she passes the test.
And she chooses instead to diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. It is the failure of the mighty Saruman, Boromir, and the success of the humble that drives this narrative forward.
They depart Lórien with the gifts of the Galdarim. They have elven cloaks for camouflage, and, critically, the elven waybread. What did the elves give them to sustain them on their journey down the great river Anduin?
They received the gray elven cloaks, which had the hue of twilight or shadowed leaves, granting them perfect camouflage. But the food was lumbas. They were warned to eat little at a time and only at need.
Because
Because one small cake was enough to keep even one of the tall men of Minas Tirith fed for a day of long labor. This just highlights how sustaining and precious the elven resource is.
as they journey down the Anduin, the elven boats, the relentless pursuit continues, unseen by most, but a shadow Frodo and Sam quickly recognize.
Yes, during the night watch, Frodo and Sam spot a dark shape near one of the boats. A long, whitish hand grabs the gunwale, and two pale, lamp-like eyes shone coldly as they peered inside.
It's Gollum.
Shot away downstream from Moria. It proves that his fixation on the ring makes him an impossible stealthy tracker.
The Fellowship arrives near Amon Hen, the seat of seeing, and must decide their next move. South to Minas Tirith with Boromir, or east toward Mordor. It is here that Boromir reaches his inevitable, tragic breaking point.
Boromir, representing the valiant but flawed nobility of men, is so frustrated by the decision to destroy the ring. He argues passionately that it is a gift to the foes of Mordor and must be used as a weapon.
He doesn't trust the elves or wizards.
No, he says, true-hearted men, they will not be corrupted. He desires the ring specifically to gain power of command, to defeat Sauron and drive the hosts of Mordor from Gondor. His love for his people is warped by the ring into a lust for dominion.
Boromir's arguments finally frighten Frodo, who puts on the ring and flees up Amon Hen, the ancient Númenórean seat. What does he witness from the seat of seeing?
Wearing the ring and sitting on the Hill of the Eye, Frodo is granted this profound panoramic vision. He sees the entire war laid out before him. He sees Orthanc, the pinnacle of Isengard, like a black spike, the broad plains of Rohan, the great river plunging over the falls of Rauros.
He sees everything.
He looks eastward into wide, uncharted lands and south to the river delta, filled with seabirds. He gains the perspective necessary to realize the ring is trying to command him, and that the world's peril is too great. He must go alone to protect his friends.
He flees, and the others scatter, shouting his name, frantic. They realize he has been gone for nearly an hour. The Hobbit's initial conspiracy becomes a frantic chase to stop him from carrying out the worst part of their initial fear, going off alone.
Merry and Pippin, having failed to find him, understand immediately. They realize he doesn't like to ask anyone to go with him, poor old fellow. Imagine it, going off to Mordor alone. They scatter desperately, seeking to fulfill their promise of companionship.
Frodo makes his final decision, finds a boat, and intends to row away.
How?
But Sam's ultimate loyalty forces Frodo to reverse the decision to go alone, defining the rest of the quest.
Sam tracks Frodo to the boats and finds him departing. When Frodo casts off, Sam leaps into the water, crying out that being left behind would be not as certain as being left behind, referring to his own death.
Frodo told him
That it would be the death of you to come with me, Sam, and he could not have borne that responsibility. But when faced with the sight of his best friend struggling to drown, Frodo relents.
he pulls him into the boat.
He hauls Sam aboard, realizing that saving the world is nothing if it means betraying the person he cares for most. Together, the two hobbits sail away, heading east to Mordor, alone but together.
The journey we've traced is one of incredible contrast and profound transition. We started with the academic rigor of tracking minor textual inconsistencies and copyright dates, the fragile foundation of this epic, and we ended with the Fellowship, once a symbol of hope, violently broken by the very object they carried.
The quest completely shifted. It went from a carefully planned, covert flight out of the sheltered Shire, protected invisibly by the Rangers and the innocence of a few hobbits,
to an explicit, agonizing, world-saving decision.
right? Safety was irrevocably traded for purpose at the cost of friendship, family, and the first taste of deep sacrificial grief.
And what we learned is that the ring seeks power. It aims to corrupt the most capable host, whether king, wizard, or high elf lord. We saw it shatter the will of Boromir, tempt Galadriel and claim Saruman,
And this brings us back to Gandalf's defense of the hobbits.
choosing friendship over great wisdom.
Exactly. The ring's purpose is to find the most powerful host to command. If that is true, then consider this. Does the simple, unguarded friendship and unflinching loyalty of Sam Gamgee, who had to be physically forced to choose his master over his own life, whose only measure is devotion?
Does that not become the most potent, unexpected, and utterly uncorruptible force opposing Sauron's dominion?
Precisely because his heart contains no desire for power whatsoever. It's the purest element in the world, leveraged as a weapon against the ultimate corruption. Something for you to mull over as we prepare for the next leg of this deep dive.